Mr. Bolden, I'm sure you still meet the remark that, what are the Negroes, why aren't they optimistic? They say, but it's getting so much better. There are Negro mayors. There's Negroes in all of sports. There are Negroes in politics. They're even accorded the ultimate accolade of being in television commercials now. And, I'm glad you're smiling. Is it at once getting much better and still hopeless?
Well, I don't think there's much hope for it, to tell you the truth. As long as people are using this peculiar language. It's not a question of what happens to the Negro here, or to the black man here. That's a very vivid question for me, But the real question is what's going to happen to this country. I have to repeat that.
Medgar, Malcolm, and Martin were very different men. Consider that Martin was only 26 in 1955. He took on his shoulders the weight of the crimes and the lies and the hope of a nation. I want these three lives to bang against and reveal each other, as in truth they did, and use their dreadful journey as a means of instructing the people whom they loved so much, who betrayed them, and for whom they gave their lives.
The moment a Negro child walks into the school, every decent, self-respecting, loving parent should take his white child out of that parochial school.
God forgives murder and he forgives adultery, but he is very angry and he actually curses all who do integrate.
If you was white, you'd be all right. If you was brown, you'd stick around. But as you black, oh brother, get back, get back, get back. They went to employment office, the number I got in line. They called everybody's number, but they never did call mine. They said, if you was white, you'd be all right. If you was brown, stick around. But as you black, oh brother.
This time, I had been taken in hand by a young white school teacher named Bill Miller, a beautiful woman, very important to me. She gave me books to read and talked to me about the books and about the world, about Ethiopia and Italy and the German Third Reich, and took me to see plays and films to which no one else would have dreamed of taking a 10-year-old boy. It is certainly because of Bill Miller, who arrived in my terrifying life so soon, that I never really managed to hate white people. Though God knows, I have often wished to murder more than one or two. Therefore, I began to suspect that white people did not act as they did because they were white, but for some other reason. I was a child, of course, and therefore unsophisticated. I took Bill Miller as she was, or as she appeared to be to me. She, too, anyway, was treated like a nigger, especially by the cops, and she had no love for landlords. Yet, I had no reservations at all concerning the terror of the black janitor and They Won't Forget. I think that it was a black actor named Clinton Rosemond who played this part, and he looked a little like my father.
I didn't do it.
He is terrified because a young white girl in this small southern town has been raped and murdered, and her body has been found on the premises of which he is the janitor.
Good morning, Jump. Jump.
The role of the janitor is small, yet the man's face bangs in my memory until today.
Nobody says you have, Tom, but they might.
The film's icy brutality both scared me and strengthened me. Because Uncle Tom refuses to take vengeance in his own hands, he was not a hero for me. Heroes, as far as I could see, were white, and not merely because of the movies, but because of the land in which I lived, of which movies were simply a reflection. I despised and feared those heroes because they did take vengeance into their own hands. They thought vengeance was theirs to take. And yes, I understood that. My countrymen were my enemy. I suspect that all these stories are designed to reassure us that no crime was committed. We'd made a legend out of a massacre.
Leaving aside all the physical facts which one can quote, leaving aside rape or murder, leaving aside the bloody catalog of oppression, which we are in one way too familiar with already, what this does to the subjugated is to destroy his sense of reality. This means, in the case of an American Negro, born in that glittering republic, and in the moment you are born, since you don't know any better, every stick and stone and every face is white, and since you have not yet seen a mirror, you suppose that you are too. It comes as a great shock around the age of 5 or 6 or 7 to discover that Gary Cooper killing off the Indians when you were rooting for Gary Cooper, that the Indians were you. It comes as a great shock to discover that the country, which is your birthplace and to which you owe your life and your identity, has not in its whole system of reality evolved any place for you.
I was to discover that the line which separates a witness from an actor is a very thin line indeed. Nevertheless, the line is real. I was not, for example, a black Muslim, in the same way, though for different reasons, that I never became a Black Panther, because I did not believe that all white people were devils, and I did not want young black people to believe that. I was not a member of any Christian congregation because I knew that they had not heard and did not live by the commandment, love one another as I love you. And I was not a member of the NAACP, because in the North, where I grew up, the NAACP was fatally entangled with black class distinctions, or illusions of the same, which repelled a shoeshine boy like me. I did not have to deal with the criminal state of Mississippi hour by hour and day by day, to say nothing of night after night. I did not have to sweat cold sweat after decisions involving hundreds of thousands of lives. I was not responsible for raising money, for deciding how to use it. I was not responsible for strategy controlling prayer meetings, marches, petitions, voting registration drives. I saw the sheriffs, the deputies, the stormtroopers more or less in passing. I was never in town to stay. This was sometimes hard on my morale, but I had had to accept as time wore on that part of my responsibility as a witness was to move as largely and as freely as possible. They don't want to realize that there is not one step morally or actually between Birmingham and Los Angeles.
We've invited three men on the forefront of the Negro struggle to sit down and talk with us in front of the television camera. Each of these men, through his actions and his words, but with vastly different manner and means, is a spokesman for some segment of the Negro people today.
Black people in this country have been the victims of violence at the hands of the white man for 400 years. And following the ignorant Negro preachers, we have thought that it was godlike to turn the other cheek to the brute that was brutalizing us.
Malcolm X, one of the most articulate exponents of the black Muslim philosophy, has said of your movement and your philosophy that it plays into the hands of the white oppressors, that they are happy to hear you talk about love for the oppressor because this disarms the Negro and fits into the stereotype of the Negro as a meek, turning the other cheek sort of creature. Would you care to comment on Mr. X's belief?
Well, I don't think of love as, in this context, as emotional bosh. But I think of love as something strong and that organizes itself into powerful, direct action. This is what I tried to teach in this struggle in the South, that we are not engaged in a struggle that means we sit down and do nothing. That there's a great deal of difference between non-resistance to evil and non-violent resistance.
Martin Luther King is just a 20th century or modern Uncle Tom or a religious Uncle Tom who is doing the same thing today to keep Negroes defenseless in the face of attack that Uncle Tom did on the plantation to keep those Negroes defenseless in the face of the attack of the Klan in that day.
I think, though, that we can be sure that the vast majority of Negroes who engage in the demonstrations and who understand the nonviolent philosophy will be able to face dogs and all of the other brutal methods that are used without retaliating with violence, because they understand that one of the first principles of nonviolence is a willingness to be the recipient of violence while never inflicting violence upon another.
As concerns Malcolm and Martin, I watched two men coming from unimaginably different backgrounds, whose positions originally were poles apart, driven closer and closer together. By the time each died, their positions had become virtually the same position. It can be said, indeed, that Martin picked up Malcolm's burden, articulated the vision which Malcolm had begun to see and for which he paid with his life. The very last time I saw Medgar Evers, he stopped at his house on the way to the airport so I could autograph my books for him, his wife, and children. I remember Merle Evers standing outside, smiling, and we waved. And Medgar drove to the airport and put me on the plane. Months later, I was in Puerto Rico, working on my play. Lucienne and I had spent a day or so wandering around the island, and now we were driving home. It was a wonderful, bright, sunny day. Top of the car was down. We were laughing, talking, and the radio was playing. then the music stopped. And a voice announced that Medgar Evers had been shot to death in the carport of his home, and his wife and children had seen the big man fall.
The Negro has never been as docile as white Americans wanted to believe. That was a myth. We were not singing and dancing down the levee. We were trying to keep alive. We were trying to survive a very brutal system. The Negro has never been happy in his place. One of the most terrible things is that, in fact, whether I like it or not, I am an American. My school really was the streets of New York City. My frame of reference was George Washington and John Wayne. But I was a child, when a child opens his eyes in the world, he has to use what he sees. There's nothing else to use. And you are formed by what you see, the choices you have to make, and the way you discover what it means to be black in New York, and then throughout the entire country. I know how you watch as you grow older, and this is not a figure of speech. The corpses of your brothers and your sisters pile up around you, and not for anything they have done. They were too young to have done anything. But what one does realize is that when you try to stand up and look the world in the face like you had a right to be here, you have attacked the entire power structure of the Western world. Forget the Negro problem. Don't write any voting acts. We had that, it's called the 15th Amendment. During the Civil Rights Bill of 1964, what you have to look at is what is happening in this country. And what is really happening is that brother has murdered brother knowing it was his brother. White men have lynched Negroes knowing them to be their sons. White women have had Negroes burned knowing them to be their lovers. It is not a racial problem. It's a problem whether or not you're willing to look at your life and be responsible for it and then begin to change it. That great Western house I come from is one house, and I am one of the children of that house. Simply, I'm the most despised child of that house. And it is because the American people are unable to face the fact that, in fact, I am flesh of their flesh, bone of their bone, created by them. My blood, my father's blood is in that soil. For example, when the ex-Attorney General, Mr. Robert Kennedy, said that it was conceivable that in 40 years in America we might have a Negro president. And that sounded like a very emancipated statement, I suppose, to white people. They were not in Harlem when this statement was first heard, and did not hear, and possibly will never hear, the laughter and the bitterness and the scorn with which the statement was greeted. From the point of view of the man in the Harlem barbershop, Bobby Kennedy only got here yesterday. And now he's already on his way to the presidency. We've been here for 400 years, and now he tells us that maybe in 40 years, if you're good, we may let you become president.
I've got to tell you because the press is on its way over here. They have just killed Malcolm.
There is nothing in the evidence offered by the book of the American Republic which allows me really to argue with a cat who says to me, they needed us to pick the cotton, and now they don't need us anymore. And now they don't need us, they're going to kill us all off, just like they did the Indians. And I can't say it's a Christian nation. If we were white, if we were Irish, if we were Jewish, if we were Poles, if we had, in fact, in your mind, a frame of reference our heroes would be your heroes too. Nat Turner would be a hero for you instead of a threat. Malcolm X might still be alive. And everyone is very proud of brave little Israel, a state against which I have nothing. I don't want to be misinterpreted. I'm not an anti-Semite. But, when the Israelis pick up guns, or the Poles, or the Irish, or any white man in the world says, give me liberty or give me death, the entire white world applauds. When a black man says exactly the same thing, word for word, he is judged a criminal and treated like one, and everything possible.
We've dropped too many bombs on Vietnam now. Let us save our national honor, stop the bombing, and stop the war.
What I am trying to say to this country, to us, is that we must know this. We must realize this. That no other country in the world have been so fat and so sleek and so safe and so happy and so irresponsible and so dead. No other country can afford to dream of a Plymouth and a wife and a house with a fence and the children growing up safely to go to college and to become executives and then to marry. To watch the TV screen for any length of time is to learn some really frightening things about the American sense of reality. We are cruelly trapped between what we would like to be and what we actually are. And we cannot possibly become what we would like to be until we're willing to ask ourselves just why the lives we lead on this continent are mainly so empty, so tame, and so ugly. These images are designed not to trouble, but to reassure. They also weaken our ability to deal with the world as it is.
Death thrown up by this society when a black man attempts to become a man.
All this emphasis upon black man and white does emphasize something which is here, but it emphasizes it or perhaps exaggerates it, and therefore makes us put people together in groups which they ought not to be in. I have more in common with a black scholar than I have with a white man who's against scholarship. And you have more in common with a white author than you have with someone who's against all literature. So why must we always concentrate on color or on religion or this? There are other ways of connecting men.
I'll tell you this. When I left this country in 1948, I left this country for one reason only, one reason. I didn't care where I went. I might have gone to Hong Kong, I might have gone to Timbuktu. I ended up in Paris, on the streets of Paris, with $40 in my pocket on the theory that nothing worse could happen to me there than had already happened to me here. You talk about making it as a writer by yourself. You had to be able then to turn off all the antenna with which you live, because once you turn your back on this society, you may die. You may die. And it's very hard to sit at a typewriter and concentrate on that if you're afraid of the world around you. The years I lived in Paris did one thing for me. They released me from that particular social terror, which was not the paranoia of my own mind, but a real social danger visible in the face of every cop, every boss, everybody. I don't know what most white people in this country feel, but I can only include what they feel from the state of their institutions. I don't know if white Christians hate Negroes or not, but I know that we have a Christian church which is white and a Christian church which is black. I know, as Malcolm X once put it, that the most segregated hour in American life is high noon on Sunday. That says a great deal for me about a Christian nation. It means that I can't afford to trust most white Christians and certainly cannot trust the Christian church. I don't know whether the labor unions and their bosses really hate me. That doesn't matter, but I know I'm not in their unions. I don't know if the real estate lobby is anything against black people, but I know the real estate lobbies keep me in the ghetto. I don't know if the Board of Education hates black people, but I know the textbooks they give my children to read and the schools that we have to go to. Now, this is the evidence. You want me to make an act of faith, risking myself, my wife, my woman, my sister, my children, on some idealism which you assure me exists in America, which I have never seen.
I never said.
All of the Western nations have been caught in a lie. The lie of their pretended humanism. This means that their history has no morals. This is the formula for a nation or kingdom decline. For no kingdom can maintain itself by force alone. Force does not work the way its advocates think in fact it does. It does not, for example, reveal to the victim the strength of the adversary. On the contrary, it reveals the weakness, even the panic of the adversary. And this revelation invests the victim with passion.
I have some very sad news for all of you, and I think sad news for all of our fellow citizens and people who love peace all over the world. And that is that Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis.
The story of the Negro in America is the story of America. It is not a pretty story. What can we do